Well, hello and welcome once again to this Alabama adventure. On this particular Alabama adventure, we go back in time. We go back to my first reported sighting of a Bigfoot. We didn't know what it was back then because Bigfoot was not as popular, was not as well known as it is now. It was beginning to sort of be known, but we didn't know that that's what we had around here. It was called a giant monkey because that's all anybody could identify it with. As a matter of fact, many years ago in this part of the country, and I guess some other places as well, Bigfoot was called a wampus. And I remember one day asking my granddad when he was talking about a wampus, what was a wampus? And he said a wampus is a giant monkey, or at least that's what it looks like. And he described it, and what he was describing was a Bigfoot. And that's what this guy this afternoon that I'm going to tell you about that told me about his sighting as he was out getting ready to do some deer hunting this particular afternoon. He had been deer hunting earlier that day, and he was changing locations. So anyway, what I want to do now is, in just a few minutes, is to take you on a little field trip over there to where this sighting occurred, to kind of give you an idea of the lay of the land, and you'll sort of know more what I'm talking about, the bank and the woods and the curb and all this type of stuff. Whenever I go to mention it in the story, at least you'll be seeing what it is. So anyway, I guess with that being said, we'll get started. Anyway, what I want to tell you about, one of the main things I want to tell you about, is how this man described this thing and some other events that occurred that afternoon. And those have come up time after time again in Bigfoot reports I've taken and other people have taken as well. And you'll kind of pick up on them as we go along. Then at the end of the video, I'll try to cover them a little bit better. I got something else I want to show you right quick before we get the video going. I want to show you this T-shirt that someone sent me. Well, it was, I know who sent it. It was a good friend of mine. Sent it to me a while back. It's got Bigfoot in Alabama. And there you can see Bigfoot's eye, I believe, on there. And I appreciate that. Now, that's not the way the T-shirt looked whenever I got it. I cut the sleeves out of it to wear in the summertime because it gets so hot down here in Alabama. But it was a real nice T-shirt. Well, it is a real nice T-shirt. But it did have short sleeves in it when I got it. But I just wanted to tell you that I usually cut the sleeves out of my T-shirts for hot weather. But I certainly appreciate her sending this to me.
And now, from the tail end of the Appalachian mountain chain in the heart of the South, this is Alabama Adventures.
Okay, now what I wanted to do today was tell you where I received my first Bigfoot report. This was not my sighting. I had my first sighting where I was living at my house many years ago. But this was the first time that somebody come by my house and said, I just saw the giant monkey, was what it was called back then. But anyway, I wanted to kind of show you where it was at, kind of give you a little idea of the lay of the land. Then I'm going to go back and tell you the story in just a few minutes. But anyway, right up here, I'm going to turn the camera. Right up here in this curve was where this thing come running across the road. And the guy that that's what we had heard it was a giant monkey. And that's what everybody in this area called it, and that's what we thought it was. But this guy here, after he saw it that day, he knew that it was not a monkey. And I'm going to tell you why in just a few minutes. But anyway, what happened right here is on this side of the road, right over here, there'll be kind of a steep bank. And that's where he was coming up the road this way. And as he neared that hill right there and started around that, as he neared that curve coming up that hill, this thing comes sliding off this bank over on this side of the road over here, and it ran across the road in front of him and went down through the woods out there. And that's where he was a big deer hunter. Of course, all of us were back in those days. And he had a dog box on the back of his truck full of deer dogs, and another dog that I'm going to tell you about also. This other dog I'm going to tell you about, he was part wolf, and he was a scary looking dog. But he was real friendly once he got to know you. But whatever this thing was, it came running across, it slid down the bank, it sort of trotted across the road. He said it never got in a big hurry, and it trotted off down through the woods out through here. And about 150 or 200 yards down in this woods, there used to be a big oak tree where a house place used to be down there. And that's where this thing climbed a tree down there. But anyway, what he did is, I'm going to get the camera back here on the curve, is when this thing ran across the road, he pulled off the road there on the same side that the bank was on, and that's where he stopped and got his gun and turned the dogs out on this creature, whatever it was. As I said, he thought it was the giant monkey, and he was fixing to take it out that day because there had been some other stories around about the monkey killing what we think killed some hogs down in Daviston, which is about 10 or 12 miles from here. But anyway, I guess I need to get on back to the studio and tell you the rest of the story. I just wanted to show you the location so you'd kind of have an idea. And it's pretty much like it was back then, the woods and everything. I believe they've been cut. I know these over here was cut several years ago, but they're beginning to grow back up about like it was whenever he saw this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up there in the curve and I'm going to show you that bank before we go back to the studio. Okay, now we're up here in the curve, and right here is the bank. Right here is where it slid off, and you could actually, back then it wasn't as covered with pine straw as it is now, but now those woods back out there look pretty much like they did back in around 1971 or 72. I believe it was 71 whenever he made this sighting. And you could actually see this thing's footprints where it had slid down this hill, because it hadn't been long rained and it was real muddy, and you could actually see them. You could actually, after we came back over here, down here in the bottom, this all wasn't grass like it is right now. At the bottom of that little hill was a kind of a little ditch where water run through it. You could see this thing's feet print in this mud down there. But I did want to let you see that so you have an idea of what it looked like, of what the area looked like of this sighting that I'm about to tell you about. Okay, now I'm going to swing the camera over here on the other side of the road, and it was right down through here where this thing took off running, and I'll give you a little idea of what that looked like when it came across the road. I'm not sure if that power pole was back then or not, but anyway, right down through these woods, right down through here was where this thing went, and he caught up with it about 150 or 200 yards back in the woods in there. As I said, you could sit here from the road and you could actually see that big old oak tree that was down there, but over the years it's either rotted down or been cut down. But anyway, that'll give you an idea of sort of what the lay of the land looked like over here where this first sighting that I ever received was at. All right, it was late fall down here in the south. It was probably around 1 to 1:30 that afternoon. This man was going to make another drive with his deer dog to see if he could chase a deer out of the woods, maybe get a shot at it. Because here in the south in the wintertime, when they change the time, it usually gets dark or between 3:30 and 4 o'clock. So he knew he had time for one more drive, and that's what he was going to, and that's what it's called whenever you put dogs out on a deer trail and get it to chase it out of the woods, out into the open to where you can get a shot at it. We call it a drive. Anyway, as it was kind of a dreary afternoon. It was drizzling rain, cool. It was late November, and anyway, it was just a damp, wet afternoon that afternoon as he was driving down this particular county road, and he ran up on this thing. But he was headed to another place where he did a lot of deer hunting. As a matter of fact, he and I had done a lot of deer hunting over the years, and this afternoon he was out by himself, just sort of seeing, I guess, if he could see anything from the road or whatever. But anyway, as he came around this, came up this hill and came into this curve, something he caught his eye, at the side of his eye. It was coming out of the woods, and as he neared it, this thing began to slide down a hill, and he could tell that it wasn't a deer because it was standing on its two hind legs, or it was running just on two legs, whatever you want to call it. But this thing slid down the hill, and he hit his brakes to slow down. He would have hit it more than likely. This thing slid down the hill. It was real muddy back then. As I said, it had been raining, as it always does in the winter here. It's always good and muddy. And as he began to sort of pull off the road where he could get a good look at this thing that was fixing to run across the road in front of him, that's exactly what it did. It came across the road. It didn't run. It just sort of trotted. It never got in a real big hurry. So anyway, it went across the road, went into the woods on the other side. So He had a dog box full of dogs that he always hauled around and kept all winter long, so in case he did see a deer run across the road, he could put the dogs on it and probably get a shot at it. So what he did was, that's what he did. He decided to put the dogs on this thing's trail that afternoon. So he pulled off, jumped out of his truck, grabbed his shotgun. He used a 12 gauge shotgun back then to hunt deer with, as most of us did. Back in those days, I think it's illegal now to hunt deer with buckshot. For some reason, I don't know what genius passed that law, but for some reason now it's or it was the last time I hunted, and that's been about 4 or 5 years ago. But anyway, he grabbed his shotgun off the rack in the back glass, and he ran around to the tailgate and let the tailgate down and put the dogs on the trail. That's exactly what they did. They took off down through the woods, barking and raising Cain and just having a big time, but that they were on a trail of something. And as they did this, he knew this thing wasn't a deer. He didn't know exactly what it was, and he thought, well, no faster than this thing's running, the dogs will probably catch it and get it down, and I'll go down there and see what it is. It could be the giant monkey that everybody's talking about, because that's exactly what he said it looked like. It was a reddish brown. It was all covered in long brown hair and was very tall. So he probably had, I don't know, 6 or 8 dogs. And he had this one dog named Dooley. Now, Dooley was part wolf, and Dooley was one more rough, mean-looking dog. He was a big dog. The reason he was so mean-looking, I guess, because he had the wolf in him, and he was so muscled up, and he was a very healthy dog, very powerful dog. Dooley a lot of times had chased deers down and had actually caught them and killed them himself. Let me tell you a little something about Dooley right quick. Dooley was a black and brown dog. But anyway, one day this man and me and some other people were off hunting, and Dooley was hot on the tail of this deer, and he was just about to run it down. He had chased it and chased it, and I guess the deer was getting tired, and just about time Dooley caught this deer and grabbed it around the throat with his mouth. Another guy had the deer in his sights, and he shot the deer. But Dooley was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The bullet hit Dooley. It hit him on the very top of the nose. I know that had to hurt, but anyway, for the rest of Dooley's life, he had a hole in the top of his nose to where he had gotten shot with this, probably a 30 caliber rifle. But anyway, it left a pretty good little hole in his nose. And if the weather was good and cold, and you went down to Mr. Briscoe is what I'm gonna call this man's name. If you went down to Briscoe's house and Dooley was like laying on the tailgate of the truck or up on the porch, up on the steps, usually he laid on the toolbox that was on his truck. Sometimes in the wintertime he'd be laying next to the front door. But if you walked up on Dooley down there, and after he got to know you, he wouldn't bark at you or anything like that. But whenever Dooley would be breathing, you know how the breath, you can see breath sometimes come out of your nose whenever you're breathing. That's the way this breath would come out of the top of Dooley's nose sometimes when he was breathing in real cold weather. And it looked like he was smoking a pipe or something. It was kind of funny, but it wasn't funny to Dooley, I'm sure. But anyway, that just wanted to tell you about Dooley, what kind of a dog he was and sort of what he looked like. Now that if you can imagine the noise that about 6 or 8 hounds are making going down through the woods, not all of them are hounds. Let me tell you a little bit about the dog so you'll have a better idea of what's going on. Daisy was a border collie. She was a female dog, but she enjoyed doing this deer hunting and stuff. And Bullet was another dog that he had. Of course, he was named after Roy Rogers' dog, I know. But Bullet was a hound, and he was after him as these other 4 or 5 hounds were too. Of course, Dooley was leading the pack down through there, as he always did. But if you can imagine what about 6 or 8 excited dogs that are going for the kill would be sounding like, barking and howling and this type of stuff, then that's exactly what this sounded like going down through the wood. And of course, Briscoe has got his gun. He's got it loaded with 5 shells, because that's all it'll hold, and he's running along behind them in the direction that they're going. Well, they get a little ways down into the woods, and the dogs bay. Now, when a dog bays, it's kind of like a howl. It means he has got something treed or he's got something on the ground. And that's what Briscoe thought, that probably Dooley had caught this thing, and the other dogs were now baying, all fixing to jump on it and go in for the kill. But anyway, he ran down through there and he came over this little rise. Of course, now the woods are real thick and he can't see a long ways in front of him, but he come running over this little rise, and here are all the dogs in this circle. But they have bayed something in the tree. They don't have anything on the ground. Whatever this thing was has climbed a tree, and it's sitting on the bottom limb, and its feet are hanging down toward the dogs, and these dogs are howling and barking everything at this creature that's in the tree, trying to grab one of his feet and pull him out of the tree. But Bigfoot, I'm going to go and call it Bigfoot because that's exactly what it was, is sitting just a little too high that when they jump up, that they miss his feet. They can't get a hold of him. And Dooley, which is a bigger dog, Dooley probably stood, I would say at least his back was at least 3 feet. His shoulders were at least 3 feet from the ground. And like I said, a very powerful dog, and he was jumping up, could almost catch him. As some of the other dogs could almost get a hold of this thing's foot, but would miss it every time. So anyway, Briscoe comes running over this little rise, and when he sees this creature sitting on this limb, he knows that it must be the giant monkey. But as I said, actually it was a Bigfoot. So this is what he does. He stands there for just a few moments, not very long, looking at this thing, and he pulls his gun up to his shoulder, clicks the safety off, and he's ready to shoot it. And this thing is just sitting there kind of sideways to him, but it's looking down at the dogs the whole time. Now that's kind of the way it's sitting with its head sideways to him, but it's looking down at the dogs, and these dogs are just going crazy that they can't get a hold of this thing, that they've got it treed, they've got it that close, and these dogs are excited. They are having one more heck of a time trying to get this thing out of the tree. So anyway, Briscoe pulls the shotgun up to his shoulder, and he gets this thing in his sights. And what he thinks about real quick is if he shoots this thing in the ear, then that would be a good brain shot, a good head shot, and should kill it immediately. But he's got 5 shots. It's loaded with a 3-inch Magnum double-aught buckshot in here. And let me tell you about a buckshot shell right quick. With a 3-inch Magnum, you have about 15 pellets. These pellets are made out of lead. They're round balls, and they're about a 1/4 inch in diameter. So he's got an old shotgun that has been shot no telling how many times, and it's beginning to wear out. And if you hold the trigger, when you pull it, if you hold it in just a certain position, then you can pump this shotgun 5 times, and it will shoot automatically as quick as you can pump it. You don't have to pump it and then pull the trigger. It's the trigger or something in the firing pin or something in there is wore out. If you hold that trigger in the right position and pump it 5 times, then you can shoot 5 times. So that's what Briscoe thought that he would try to do to himself. He said, if I can get a good bead on this thing and shoot it in the head 5 times, you take 5 shells times 15 pellets going in there, should stop anything. Now, if he can shoot this thing 5 times in the head, that would be about 75 of these 1/4 inch lead pellets going into its brain. And as I said, that should certainly bring it down regardless of what it is. So anyway, that's what he did. He brought the gun to his shoulder, and he widened his feet just a little bit. As a matter of fact, he put one foot behind him because he was fixing to fire this shotgun 5 times to where he could get a good steady shot. And he pulled a bead on this thing where he thought its ear was. The hair was over its ear. He could not see an ear, but he was just sort of guessing from where this thing's eye and nose was, where the ear should be. But anyway, as he began to squeeze the trigger to shoot this thing pulled its head up and looked around at him. And he said when this thing looked around at him, his eyes got wide. He said he know his mouth come open. He said he knows his mouth come open over there. He was so surprised that when he looked in this thing in the face, that it almost looked human. It had a human-looking face. It had a human nose. It had a human-looking mouth. He said, of course, it had a beard and hair was hanging down somewhat in its face, but it sort of went to the side. But he said this thing had a human-looking face. And he said at that, said he paused a few minutes, said now he was looking at a bead at this thing right between its eyes when it turned its head and sort of raised its head up from where he thought its ear should be. And it turned around to look at him. he said he had a bead right between this thing's eyes, and he still knew if he pumped 5 bullets, 5 shells into this thing's face, that no doubt he was fixing to kill it. But he said he couldn't pull the trigger because it looked too human. Now, how many times have we heard that these things look human? I have heard some other people talk about to shoot one, and it just had a human look to it. And he said he couldn't shoot it. And he said he kept sitting there, but he kept the gun on it in case it attacked him or something. He could certainly have shot it then. But he said something, he just heard some voice, and he didn't know where the voice come from. He said it might not have been a voice, but said something in his mind told him, if you're going to do it, do it. Like this thing was telling him, if you're going to shoot me, do it now and get it over with. But he said when he heard this, said he paused for a little bit longer and took his finger off the trigger and clicked the safety back on. And he said when he did, it was like this thing knew what he had done. He said this thing jumped out of the tree, and it jumped right into the middle of this pack of dogs, and said then it began swinging its arms left and right, just back and forth, and said it would hit a dog upside the head, or might hit a dog in the side or in the stomach or whatever. And said when it did, it was hitting these dogs very hard, and these dogs would go sailing through the air, and they would go to hollering like like they had been hit real hard, and it was real painful and everything. And he said then all at once, here comes Dooley, who's not afraid of anything. Here comes Dooley back up the trail, going back toward the truck, and all the dogs were screaming and hollered like you hear a dog whenever it gets hit, the way that they'll yelp. That these dogs were getting out of the woods and they were leaving this thing alone. And he said most of the dogs ran over the top of him and actually knocked him down, getting out of the woods. And said he scrambled to his feet real quick because he didn't know what this creature was fixing to do, if it was fixing to attack him or what was going on. And he said this thing, after it hit about the last dog and the last dog took off, said it didn't have to hit them but about once or twice, and they were ready to get away. And he said this thing was kind of bent forward where it was swinging its arms, hitting the dog. And he said it actually looked up at him and looked at him eye to eye. And he said he don't remember if he said it out loud or if he just said it in his mind. He said everything was happening so quick and everything was so excited over there that afternoon that he told this thing, run, I'm not going to hurt you. And he said at that thought, or at him saying, he said he didn't know for sure if he said that out loud or if he just thought that. But he said this, as this thing looked at him and he said that or thought it, he said this thing turned around and took off running down through the woods, and said that was the last time he saw it. And he comes out of the woods too because he didn't know if there might be another one coming down the trail or if there might be some more down there that was fixing to come out and get him and the dogs. But he goes back up the little trail, back up to the road to the truck. And when he gets to the truck, the dogs are waiting on him. They're already in the dog box, and they're whining, and they're ready to go. And so he closes the tailgate and gets back in the truck, puts his gun back in the gun rack area. All right, so the dogs are back in the box, and he gets his gun back in the rack there, and gets in the truck and comes over to my house immediately after this little encounter happened. And he and I talked about it for a little while. Of course, I made my notes on it and that type of stuff. I didn't have any like Bigfoot report forms or anything like that. I did have a few notebooks that I kept up with, like UFOs or ghosts or whatever came along. I had a different notebook for a different subject, and I wrote down, made me a lot of notes on what he said that afternoon about what had happened and everything, what had taken place. But he wanted me to go back over there with him, and that's what I did. I got in the truck, and of course I grabbed a gun too before I left, because we didn't know what to expect or what this thing was back then. And we go back over there to exactly where he said it happened, and sure enough, here are these two long footprints to where it came off the bank that afternoon and slid down in front of him in the road. Now, one thing I left out about when it slid down, he said as this thing came off the bank, that it was a two-legged creature. He could pretty much tell that. But as it came out of the woods, it was on its two hind legs, and when it started down the bank and it started sliding, that this thing squatted down. That it squatted down like on its heels, like you would do when you were coming down the bank. And he said then as soon as it slid down the bank, squatted down, and it got to the bottom of the bank down there in the ditch, that's when it stood back up on its two hind legs, and he could tell that this thing must be the giant monkey that everybody was spotting in that. Not everybody, but a lot of people had spotted in that area back then. And but that's what he kept talking about, that it never got in a big hurry, that it just sort of trotted across the road in front of him. And that's one thing that has come up a lot in Bigfoot reports, that whenever cars approach them a lot of times, that they don't seem to get in a hurry, even though a car is coming at them at top speed sometimes, that they just kind of walk across the road or take their time getting across the road. Another thing that a lot of people have commented on that I mentioned earlier is he said this thing had a human looking face. A lot of people have commented on that. Now, not all of them have a human looking face. Some of them do have a ape-like, more ape-like than others, but that's just a different species of Bigfoot that there are. And also, one thing that he mentioned in the very first report that I took, and I didn't realize this till a long time later, and it began to show up a little bit more often, that these things are psychic. Now, was that what he heard? Was this thing communicating with him telepathically over there that afternoon? I'm not really sure if Bigfoot can speak our language like English or whatever, but I do know that they do talk with us back and forth with telepathy. I'm trying to think of the word again right quick. But is that what happened over there in that very first report that I took? Was this thing psychic and communicating with him telepathically over there that afternoon? And when he said that he couldn't remember that if he said the words out loud or if he said it in his mind that he wasn't going to hurt this thing, for it to run, that he was not going to hurt this thing, did the Bigfoot pick up on it with his thoughts? Did the Bigfoot know what he was thinking? Undoubtedly, I believe the Bigfoot knew that he was fixing to shoot it, because the thing said, if you're going to do it, do it. So anyway, it's just some things that I have wondered about, and you tell me what you think about that. Were they communicating back and forth with telepathy over there that afternoon? One other thing that I do want to add to the video about that sighting this particular afternoon was all of these dogs never hunted again. The dogs got ruined over there that afternoon, all except Dooley. Dooley was the only dog in the bunch that actually hunted deer again. And so anyway, it was undoubtedly quite a traumatic experience for the dogs over there. It was pretty much a traumatic experience for Briscoe too. But that was something I did want to add, that this little encounter ruined those deer dogs over there. They never hunted deer or anything else again. They pretty much became yard dogs. And there's one other little thing that I want to add to this video before we close it on out this afternoon. You remember a few videos back, we did a video about Bankhead National Forest, and my friend Ed up there doing a lot of research on Bigfoot, and he's doing a lot of good work up there. Anyway, he sent me another picture that he had enlarged of a Bigfoot that he believed he made, and I believe it is too after I saw the picture. I want you to look at it and tell me what you think. It's behind a structure of some type that this Bigfoot had built. And Ed walked up on it, and he wanted to make a picture of it real quick. And after he got back home, we believe within this structure is Bigfoot looking through it at him. So you look at this picture and see what you think. Well, now once again, I better bring this video on to a close, and I want to let you know that the Alabama Bigfoot Society is run completely out of pocket. And if you would like to, and if you're in a position where you can make a donation, that would be very much appreciated. All you have to do is to go to our website, alabamabigfootsociety.com, and right there on the front page, you'll find a place to where you can make that donation. If you like this video, I hope you give us a like, and if you like what we're doing down here with our paranormal investigations and our stories and that type of stuff, I hope you subscribe to the channel. And I guess with all that being said, good Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise, I'll see you somewhere on down the trail.